Please welcome the SLA CEO and Executive Director, Benjamin McKay.
Good morning. Thank you, Hank, for that presentation. I guess I didn't pick it up when we were in San Francisco, the paperless part, but you should know, and I'm not bragging here, but I am, the SLA is paperless. So we've already taken that step. It's an important step. We're going to put up here the vision statement for the SLA, and the reason for that is that's sort of the touchstone for the association, for your association. Everything we do, all of the programs we've highlighted prior to me coming up here, all the ones that I'm going to highlight, somehow tied to this statement. We keep it on our wall, we keep it on our desks. If you want us to do something differently, you need to talk to the board about changing that. And speaking of the board, I'd like to thank the board and thank the committees and all of you for coming up with these ideas and helping us put them into action. So as you saw highlighted, the next gen videos and website and the learning center, that all comes out of a long, laborious process that involves committee members coming up with ideas, the board accepting those ideas, funding them, staff managing the process, and then voila, you get a project, a finished project, and finished in quotes because they need constant nurturing, and then constant reevaluation. Is this still worth doing? And year after year. So that's the process we're in now. It doesn't happen by SLA staff alone, although we have a great staff and I thank them, but we really are heavily reliant on volunteers. And so thank all of you for your commitment, because we know, particularly in brokerage, every hour you're with us is an hour you could be making some money. So we really understand that and appreciate it. I'd also like to thank, we have some CDI members here, California Department of Insurance staff. These are the people we lean on to answer our questions, to help us help you. They are tremendous professionals. And if you happen to run into them or be talking to them, it's worth saying a thank you to them. So from the stage, thank you all. And speaking of the CDI, this is the first meeting we've had where Commissioner Dave Jones isn't our commissioner since I've been in the SLA. So he's been our commissioner the whole time. He was really great to work with on a couple issues, and I'll talk a little bit about one in a minute. But we're into a new era, and that new era brings us a new leader, who is Commissioner Ricardo Lara. Now, we're fortunate in that we started another new initiative, which we haven't highlighted here today, last year, which was our legislative fly-in. So you may not know, but the SLA has a legislative committee, and that committee is engaged in advising and actually actively advocating for our marketplace. And you saw that in one of the clips about building relationships in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. And that's the committee that's in charge of that. This committee last year, led by Hank Haldeman, decided we needed to go to Sacramento, be a little bit more of a presence, right? Our marketplace is growing. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's a lot more attention on us, especially given new products like cannabis that are getting everybody's attention, are largely insured by us. So we had our first ever fly-in. It was a new innovation. During that fly-in, we met with then Senator Ricardo Lara, which ended up being very prescient, because he then subsequently became our insurance commissioner. But it was a great meeting. We met with several members, lots of staffers, and then he came into the meeting. He clearly had some understanding of our business, which was great to see. Subsequently, now he's won. But what's also notable about Senator Lara is he sponsored legislation related to wildfires. And that legislation was a non-cancellation for a year bill that showed that he has a lot of interest in issues that are going to touch us potentially in the surplus lines world. And wildfires is certainly one of them. Why is wildfires perhaps more politically sensitive than, say, a construction wrap? Well, because it affects individuals. And whenever you're talking about an insurance product that touches a person versus a company, the regulators are going to be more in tune to it. They're going to be paying a lot more attention. Why? Because they figure, hey, a big corporation, they've got risk managers and lawyers and lots of money, and they can take care of themselves. But, you know, Bob and Molly over here don't. And so it's our job, and it is their job, to protect them. And that's true, and it's the right point of view. But that also means we, as the insurance industry, have to be more careful. And we're starting to see a lot of dialogue, a lot of questions. In fact, I got a call on Monday from the Wall Street Journal about this issue of policies moving from the admitted market, homeowners policies in fire zones moving from the admitted market to the surplus lines market. And did I think that was a problem? And the answer is, that's how the market's designed to work, right? If you can't get your insurance in the admitted market, in homeowners anyway, you have two options. You go to the fair plan, and you take that fair plan policy, or you go to the surplus lines market. Now there's other, as I'm learning, there's other admitted wraps that go around the fair plan and things like that. But basically, those are your two options. And this reporter said, okay, I understand that, but isn't it more expensive to go into the surplus lines marketplace? And I said, more expensive than what? Than not having a policy? Right? They're trying to create this false choice. They're trying to say, oh, well, the admitted product is X, and the surplus lines product is X plus 6%. I said, there is no admitted product. That's why it's in the surplus lines. You're comparing us to nothing. Right? I said, that's the choice. They're trying to force us into this false choice. Right? This is what they do with the insurance industry. I used to be on the admitted side. They do the same thing. I can give you a lot of stories on that side too. But that's what they're doing on wildfire. So as you're dialoguing with people and talking about it, particularly wildfire homeowners in this particular market, we're moving in there because the admitted market won't be there. They're not there. So that's becoming a hot topic, obviously, no pun intended. In DC, it's likely to continue to be a very pressing topic. Evidence of that, not only the fact that the Wall Street Journal is calling, but they had a hearing last year, and our own Tim Burnett, who's a member of our legislative committee and is here today, testified on our behalf. The prior hearing, I testified on our behalf. And so there's very likely to be another hearing this year. This is what Congress does. This is what the legislature does. They build a hearing record. They bring you in, they ask you lots of questions, and then they write it down, and they wait till you forget what you said, and then they go, hey, didn't you say this 2 years ago? And you say, oh. Yes, I did. So that's what's happening now, and that's going to lead to legislation. Fortunately, unfortunately, we've got the PGE bankruptcy that sort of has most of the focus, but eventually these legislators are going to feel the need to act. And hopefully when they do, it doesn't hamper our marketplace. You know, and I should say that is sort of one of our key functions that we probably don't talk about a lot, is creating that safe, fair, and competitive marketplace. How is that done? Well, this is one way it's done. It's done by not letting Congress encroach on our ability to write homeowners policies in fire zones. Another example you just heard about was cannabis. Hank was talking about cannabis. This is a marketplace that when the original rule came out on cannabis, the rule, meaning the law that was going to govern cannabis, we were specifically excluded from it. You weren't allowed to insure cannabis in the non-admitted market. So then at the time, Commissioner Jones, who I was just mentioning, had a hearing about this down here in Los Angeles. Clifton and I went down. I testified, and I said, look, if you're requiring the insurance to be in the admitted market, you're not going to have any insurance. And the commissioner thought about it for about a minute, and he said, yeah, you're right. And he changed the rule, right? So, and so this isn't like a theoretical exercise. This is reality, right? It happened. I could show you the rule before, I could show you the rule after, right? It happened. And that's not the only time it happened. It just recently happened with toxic waste facilities, right? Someone's like, those have to be insured in the admitted market. I'm not a good toxic waste facility expert, but I suspect the fact that we got that changed so you can insure it in the surplus lines market probably was helpful to whoever owns the toxic waste facility and needs insurance. You know, I don't know, Jake from State Farm, do they insure toxic waste facilities? You know, and it's every year. We had LLCs that have contractor licenses about 4 years ago. They weren't allowed to get their insurance from the non-admitted market. We had to change that rule. We had autonomous cars when the DMV came out with their rule, had to be in the admitted market. So there's just all these agencies, particularly the ones that aren't insurance agencies, they don't get it. And then some consumer group walks in there and says, this sounds good. You know, you don't want to put it in that unregulated surplus lines marketplace. And so that's how they write the rule. And then we get shut out market by market by market by market, or segment by segment, until, you know, we're just stuck with this little group of policies we're allowed to write. But the good news is your association's fighting back on that. And so far we've been very successful. Cooler heads have prevailed, but it's a matter of vigilance. This is why we have these committees. Because if we fall asleep at the wheel, we're going to wake up one day and not have any of these markets available to us. And it is interesting when you think about the admitted versus not admitted market, because most of these mechanisms are created really to regulate the admitted market, right? Every state's got a Department of Insurance with hundreds of employees, thousands of attorneys, thousands of investigators. We have statutes this long, regulations that would fill this entire room, and it's all for the admitted market. And then you look at the failure rates between the admitted market and the non-admitted market, and they're about equal. I mean, that's just a reality. We are largely, we are regulated, to be sure. Brokers are regulated, we're broker-regulated state, but there is a huge, compared to the admitted market, we are largely self-regulated. And that's the other function of your association, to make sure there's a fair, competitive, and healthy marketplace, is making sure we do it right. That's why your chairman was talking about education, 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 because we think that's one of the ways we can ensure compliance. And then if we comply, we stay out of the crosshairs, right? We avoid that encroachment of regulation into our space. That gives us the freedom, well, freedom of form and rate, of course, which are fundamental to our business, but freedom of movement, freedom of activity, freedom of creativity. And that's what keeps us expanding. So that's critical. So let's think about that for a second. What does our market look like? How are we doing? And in the last 4 years, as I think one of the videos referred to, we're doing spectacularly well, right? Since 2014, we've grown from about $5.9 billion in premium to $7.6 billion in premium. So it's been spectacular growth. The number of items has grown somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000 more items this year than in 2014, which of course drives the trade association's need, because we have to process, analyze every one of those items, by the way. And we actually thought, well, maybe we could outsource it. Maybe we could just do some sort of surveying where we take random samples. We talked to the department about that, and they said, no, you can't do that. So we've had to hire more analysts to analyze what's going to likely be 800,000 items in this next calendar year. So it's a lot of business, which is good. It means you guys are doing spectacularly well. At least I think that's what it means. As an industry, if you look at our market share, this graph will show you we've moved from 7% of the commercial market space to 18%. Why does that matter? Well, number one, it shows, again, spectacular growth, but it also means we sort of went from not material to material. You know, somewhere in there is probably the invisible line that says, we didn't know who you were, we didn't care. We got to figure out who you are because we care. Right? Now you're significant. That's probably where I think we are, this out of the shadows thing. So keep that in mind. This is also partially why we have all these hearings and why we're having to play not only at the state level, but also at the federal level. Federal level, an example would be the National Flood Insurance Program. We've been trying to get the federal government to allow private sector flood policies, including surplus lines policies, to have the same effect as a national flood insurance policy for purposes of protecting a federally backed mortgage. And this has been a multi-year, multi-trade association effort. For our space, the WSIA took the lead. And we finally got a rule passed where it mentions surplus lines in the preamble, but not in the actual rule. The problem with that is the actual rule is law, and the preamble is the preamble. But the preamble does say that surplus lines has the effect of an admitted policy, so anybody interpreting the rule hopefully will rely on that preamble, and that'll help create that marketplace for us, or at least protect that marketplace for us. So that's another expansion at the federal level for us. So how does this bode well? Why, lots of questions out of this, a lot of questions I don't have answers for, like, so why are we outpacing the admitted market, right? Construction, whatever. Everybody's got an answer to that, but I don't have a great answer to that. But then the other question is, what's going to happen going forward? What is we obviously are tied largely or loosely, with the exception of a few hard markets according to S&P, to the broader growth of GDP. Well, what's GDP look like for the next year? Well, every economist keeps saying, or every economist I keep reading keeps saying, well, there's going to be a recession, there's going to be a downturn, there's going to be a recession. And we don't see it in our numbers, just FYI. But also, I looked more into it, and when they say there's going to be a recession, they say, but there's like a 15% chance in the next 12 months. I'm like, well, hell, I'm not an economist. I can predict a 15% chance in the next 12 months, right? I mean, it's like absurd. Like, how long do these guys go to school? It's like my buddy who he always wants to be the first one to tell you something. So he's like, hey, did you hear Jerry Brown's running for president? Right? Doesn't happen. Hey, did you hear that Donald Trump is going to resign? Didn't happen. Hey, did you hear Kamala Harris is running for president? Did happen. Told you. Right? That's what I feel these economists are. They're like my buddy. They want to be the first one to tell you. So they give you these bizarre odds. So I'll tell you what we're seeing for us. The board has predicted we're going to have growth. We're going to have good growth. We had spectacular growth last year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 16%. We're going to have that this year. But the numbers, and it's early because obviously we're only in February, but the numbers they look like last year. So our marketplace looks strong. I would also say we lag. So when the recession happened in 08, it took a couple years before we actually saw it in our numbers. So we sort of were like a trailing indicator, I guess. So keep that in mind. It kind of gives us a little bit of a preview, but obviously you want to see it and prepare for it before it happens. But that's kind of what we're seeing in the marketplace. And I'll close with this. When you leave here, what I would like to be in your head, besides that you had a good time, it's time well spent, but what I would like in your head is, that we are your trade association, that our purpose is to create a fair, healthy, and competitive marketplace. We do that in a lot of ways. We are a largely self-regulated organization, which means we're depending on each other, our own ethics, our own moral code, to make sure this industry thrives and that we do compete, but we compete properly. Know that your association's here to give you the tools to hire young people, get your people educated so they can comply. Do the lobbying so the market is available to you when you want to write business in it. And then also to make sure that if you have time and you can, to give back. And that includes being part of the association, committees, and that sort of thing, but also, charitably to build the reputation of the industry, financially, and if not, then of your time. So thank you again for being here. Much appreciated, and that concludes my remarks. Thank you.